Hey, everybody. We're going to give people a minute to pop on. I am so pleased. I have a special guest with me today. I haven't done one of these in a couple months, so I'm really excited that I am doing it now, and I'm doing it with this person, and we're going to talk about something that's really good. So we appreciate anybody sharing the broadcast. We appreciate all your comments and you popping on. Oh, well, there people come. So very good. So we'll just start getting into the conversation. So I'm Nikki Woods, for those of you who are not familiar with me, but I think you should be since you're on my page. And I am going to talk to a soon-to-be published author for the first time, but he already has a lot of amazing stuff going on. His name is Wil Harris, and he is the executive director of Transformative Coaching, LLC. And so his background is in leadership development, public speaking, and community organizing. He also has a consulting company, which is a Transformative Coaching LLC. Before that, he was the leadership development coordinator for Youth Build Trumbull County in Warren, Ohio. He's also worked with the prevention as a prevention specialist for the Warren Urban Minority Alcoholism and Drug Abuse Outreach Program. And also a congressional aide for Congressman Tim Ryan. But the reason that we're talking to him today, other than he's just a phenomenal person, is that he is about to be an author. And I got a chance to look at the book, and I am just fascinated. So I want to discuss.
Let's go. I'm ready. Hello, everybody.
Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So do you want to tell us anything else other than what I have already said about you and who you are? And why we're super excited to be talking to you today?
I guess I was a first-time author, and I just want to say that anybody that's writing books, I got involved with it. I guess the first step was to just try to write something every day. I mean, I'm like a lot of people, you sit around and you say, I just really want to write a book. Particularly like a lot of us, we all have a story. And that's one thing I realized. You had a story, you had your ups and downs. And a lot of times when we want to write books, it's because we want to help someone who is in our situation. And my book is a story. It started out as Epiphany, my first book initially. And Epiphany was a story about me. And there are some things about me. I grew up, I was raised by my grandfather when I was in Miami at a young age. And, a lot of, being talked down to, a lot of abuse and physical abuse and things like that. He was just a good person, but, he was just dealing with what he was dealing with. And growing up, a lot of times as young kids, we hear something from an older person or someone we respect, and we take it as fact. And I went through a lot of things growing up, or as thinking I was dumb, thinking I was stupid. And in the first grade, I couldn't read, I couldn't write, and I spoke with a speech impediment. So I eventually moved to Ohio, and I went through a lot of things during that. And I wanted
wait, Will. See, I already know this story, so I know you are going through it really quickly. Hey, Michael. Hey, Mia. Hey, Carolyn. Hey, Katrina. Thanks for sharing, for showing up. And if you could share, that would be great. But you were taken from the home,
right,
and moved to Ohio because you ended up with third-degree burns, or first-degree burns. Third degree?
Yeah, on my back.
On your back.
Yeah, on my back.
So Child Protective Services had to step in.
Yeah. And we moved to Ohio. Thank God. I think a lot of times things happen in our lives that change the trajectory. And that was one of the things that changed the trajectory of my life, because going to Ohio, their school system was like light years ahead of us. They were reading out loud. And when I went to class, I tried to blend in, kind of like read with the crowd, but then they broke us into smaller groups and little circles. And we had to go around the circle and read on our own, individuals. And the teacher found out from that exercise that I couldn't read. And they put me in a special class. They put me back a year in a special class, and a teacher by the name of Miss Lucy took the time to teach me how to read, how to write, how to spell my name, my colors, everything. I didn't know anything. And she was so phenomenal that by the sixth grade, I had written my first play. And
awesome. Yeah. So the book, Will has a book he's talked about his first book, Epiphany, that he's got a series of books in him, as a lot of us do. The name of the first book, though, that is going to be published is called The Wicker Diary. Hey, P.A. Cater, thank you. Oh, thank you. They're listening from England, so we are glad that you joined us for a few minutes. It will be up on my page, so you can definitely enjoy it later if you need to go to sleep. Hey, Miss Selena. And so the name of Wil's first book that's going to be published is called The Wicker Diary, and it's actually going to release on October 10th, so you can definitely check it out then. But you can also get a free chapter first, and I put the link up there, and I'll put it back up there in a second. But it's well, let me just put it up there now so you guys can see it. So that's where you can go get a free chapter, and you can download it and read it before it actually launches. But I was so fascinated by this because the Wicker Diary is actually based on your grandmother's diary that you found after she died.
Well, after my aunt died. My grandmother died when my mom was 10.
Okay.
So my mom didn't even know her. So you can understand how impactful it would have been to find that diary. And right. So it kind of, the revelations, a lot of times I think, like my grandfather was a one-dimensional person to me. He was abusive. He was a name caller and so on and so forth. He was very toxic. Right. So that's all I ever knew. But the diary brought out something totally different. A three-dimensional person who had feelings, who had been through things, who had challenges of his own. And I was able to appreciate him more and was able to forgive him because of what I learned. Learn that he was a real person and things lead up to who we become. And he had a story. And I think that a lot of times if we knew people's stories, then we could understand them better.
No, absolutely. And I think I'm always fascinated. I told you this. I mean, my family has like a rich, interesting, sometimes toxic, history as well. And right. I spent a couple of years teaching in Jamaica before I went into radio and television. And I probably am like the only one of my generation that knows a lot of like our family's history. And I've started compiling it too. So that's why your story is also so fascinating to me. So the Wicker Diary really is based on your grandmother's journals. And tell us a little bit about the story because it follows some of your family members in their lives. And it's just so interesting to me. So tell us a little bit about that.
I found out about a great-great-grandfather who fought in the Civil War and some of the things that he went through. And it's very timely considering a lot of the things that we as Black people and people of color are going through right now with the monuments and so on and so forth, the removal of them. And just to hear the perspective of some of the men, as far as my great-great-grandfather, and not just that, but some of the accounts of some of the other men who he knew, what they experienced and what they went through, their struggles. It's very similar to what we're going through right now. I mean, it's a story. And let me say this. So I stopped writing Epiphany and I started working on the Wicker Diary because the Wicker Diary, I believe, is basically a prequel to my book and it better explains me. And so it took 6 years to actually write the book. The reason why it took 6 years is because I lost the script twice. First time I lost the script is because I learned the hard way, first time writer, that you need to save your script for multiple devices. And then the second time I lost it, I had to learn that lesson again. So I took like a year off the second time I lost it because I really walked away from the project. I wasn't even going to do it. Right. I was like, this is too much work. Second time losing it must be a sign. And I just wanted to do some other things. So I took a year and a half off. But after a year and a half, it's like I built a new drive. And I was able to finish it after that. But it was a 6 years. Hopefully the next book won't take half as long as that. Exactly. So I'm thinking that. But, when it's like you're birthing something and you want to be true to the people who you're talking about. And you want to be true to the people who you want to read it. I'm the type of person, I'm very critical when it comes to books because I like to be lost in a book. When I'm lost in a book, it's a movie. It's no longer a book. And I want to be able to write something like that. That's why it took so long, because I wanted to represent not only my family, but to represent me properly.
So just speaking from an author then, because I think this is always like the biggest challenge for me and most any writer is like, when do you know it's ready to let go? Like, when did you know it was really done?
I knew it was done when, because there didn't have to be an ending. I could have kept writing about it for 20 years. Right. I could have been writing for 20 years. There was always something and always something to add to it. So I eventually had to say, listen, you got to save some for next time. And I had to look at what I was going to do as far as the next book. And I saved some of the diary. I didn't even put all of it in. People are going to read about this story, and the finishing of the story is going to be in the second book. but it's an introduction. So I knew then that, you know, I didn't want to bombard people with all the information. I had to keep it in my mind and say something for the next book.
Yeah, I actually wrote, and I haven't done anything with it yet, but I'm glad that I did it when I did. I wrote, my father and my uncle wanted to write a book about my grandfather, their father, because he basically raised him as a single father. And it's just a really interesting story about, you know, him. He was from Mississippi, had like a, you know, less than a third grade education, but he was able to do so much, you know. And so it really was just a testament to him and his character and all of the lessons that he instilled in, you know, my uncle and my father, and then in us. And then I see myself instilling in my children. It's just like this. It's just a really great story. And it's just great for us to have, you know, because my kids didn't know him. And, you know, it's just great for the family to have. But I think that it really has some value for other people. But my uncle died a year ago. So I was really glad that we got it done, because it really was his passion project. But I'm really glad we got it done. But because it's family, I mean, I think that you hold it a little closer, you know, and I keep wanting to make sure that it's as perfect as possible, and it just really reflects them and all of that. Did you go through that too?
I definitely went through that. It's so interesting to hear about their time, and they didn't have computers, they didn't have internet, they didn't have any of those things that we have, and they made it, and they lived, and they had fun, and they had tragedies, and they had deceptions, and to know that went on back then, but just to hear how resilient those people were back then, it's unbelievable. You got heroines and heroes back there, sheroes back there, and I think a lot of people have them in their families and they don't even know it. So
we got a question for Clinton, and I'm going to ask you in a second, but I'm just going to tell you, because and this is so true, because my grandfather, I mean, he had his own house, you know, and like he was a janitor. I mean, he really, you know, like I said, he had a third grade education. And he had this phenomenal like basement, and it had like a shuffleboard, you know, thing and everything. It was just the best basement ever. And when we were writing the book, my dad was telling the story, and he said literally like he baked a bunch of pies and just invited the neighbors over, and they built this they like dug it out and built it. And my dad's like, I don't even know if it was up to code. And I was like, so we could have been killed at any moment in this basement that was built, you know, for a bunch of pies. It's just like phenomenal to me. So Clinton has a question for you, Wil, and says, does the book reveal family secrets that if not told would have taken away from the book? And how did you handle that with family members? He's about to write his bio. So that's his question for you.
Oh, that's a good question. Oh man, it's difficult to write about, you know, people in your family and like some of the things. First of all, the names are changed. And basically, I guess the best advice I can give you is just be true to the people that you're writing about. And some of the things that you're going to write is not going to be reflective. I wrote some things about my dad. You know, I spoke with my dad. I went to Fort Pierce, Florida years ago and interviewed him, and hours of interviewing. And he was basically being real with me about Vietnam and some of the things he's been through. And I remember writing about him and some of the things he talked to me about. And I was like, man, he's going to seem like a monster in this book. And I know that, you know, just by reading it and having, you know, the editor who read it, you know, she related to his character more than anybody. And I thought he was a monster in the book. So you never know how other people are going to relate, because some people can relate to things. Don't put yourself into it. Just be true to the people. That's all I would say. Just remove yourself and be true to that person.
Well, and you know what, I don't know if I necessarily agree with that last part, but what I tell clients, because, you know, I encourage everybody to own their story and to write their story. And a lot of my books, you know, have some really hard stories to tell. And so I agreed with speaking with people and letting them know you're about to write your book. But at the end of the day, I mean, it really is, if you're telling your story, it really is your truth. I mean, sometimes when there's like, you know, molestation or there's, you know, other things involved, people have different recollections. And even when I was writing my grandfather's story, it's like my brother, I mean, my uncle and my dad would tell the same story, but it was totally different recollections of the same story. So everybody has their truth, and you have a right to tell your truth. But I love that you had that conversation first. And that's what I would encourage anybody to do, to let them know, you know, I'm about to tell my story the way I recollected and how it affected me. And, you know, and this may not be great for you, but I also think if you really are worried about the impact, like you, change the names of people. But at the end of the day, they have to own their part of whatever it was. But you have to tell your truth. Yeah.
And I agree with that. And what I was saying is about be true to the person is if my grandfather lifted me up by my shirt and threw me into a wall across the room, that's what happened.
Yeah. No, I get that. Yeah.
You know, and yeah, so I agree 100%. You know, you tell your story and you let people know and you let them know that this is what's going to happen and you just be real.
Yeah. And, you know, I think it just opens up for so much. I mean, I'd say when people tell their story, you give other people permission to tell their story. And, right. You know, when I have a series called Shift. And so I told, you know, my story, like in college, I was beaten and I was raped and I was left in an alley to die. And I never really told that story as a part of who I was. And I put it in this book for the first time. And I was just amazed at the people in my circle that had the same story and none of us knew it. Like we never talked about it. And so I mean, it's so prevalent and you would be surprised at like how many people have, you know, either they know somebody or they dealt with it themselves or something. And because we don't tell our story, we never can really have those conversations. So when you think about like child abuse and you think about, you know, sexual assault and all of these horrible things that a lot of us deal with, but we make it worse because we don't ever fully heal because I think we're still a little bit ashamed of it in some regards. And so we don't tell anybody. Right. And so it makes it hardest for us to heal, but then you also don't help anybody else or give them permission to heal that part of themselves and have the conversation about it. So I think writing about stuff like that and sharing your story, even sometimes when it's good, is like one of the most courageous things anybody can do. Because you're really like just holding up your soul, you know, and saying, you know, either heal or judge me. Whatever you choose to do, I'm ready for it. But it's just a really courageous thing. It really is.
Yes.
So what is some of the reaction? I mean, you talked about your father, but did other family members have reactions to it as well?
Not really, other than people really want to read the book. Yeah. I mean, because everybody's waiting on the book. You know, my mom is waiting on the book. My brother is waiting on the book. I got other family members. But I wanted to piggyback on something that you were saying because you made me think of something. I went to a funeral a few months ago in Miami, a funeral of my family, and I'm hooked up with some other family members on my father's side. Mm-hmm. And I was being told about an incident where, you know, a lot of family members had gotten together and talked about some things that had gone on, and they were just having a lunch amongst family, and revelations came out in that conversation when they were all kids. I mean, you're talking about women in their 40s and 30s and even older, and had been together family and had never known. One person just brought up something that happened, and after that, an avalanche of stuff came out. So I just want to say there's a lot of secrets in families, and a lot of times,
absolutely,
well, turn over stones.
And especially like with that era, because you really, and for African Americans, I think especially, you really like had to suck it up and go on with life. I mean, that was just a part of life. And I think that it's interesting because, I mean, like I said, when I was learning about my mother's side of the family, I was just shocked at like the scandal and, you know, the whatnot that went on. I was like, y'all were ridiculous. But it's just the way, you know, it is. And I think that every family has something, you know, whether or not you can see it on the surface or not. I think we all have, you know, stuff. So I just want to make mention of what Tony just said on Facebook, because I think that you're right. I think people do have a right to privacy, and they have a right to go through their own redemption and not to be demonized. But like I said, I mean, I think that everybody has to own their own truth. But I mean, I agree. I don't know if you should just tell your story to brutalize people or to scandalize them. But I think that if their story is a part of your story and your healing and how it impacted you, then you have a right to tell it. We have another question from Miss Selena. Will, as you were writing, did you go through an emotional roller coaster? I find when I'm writing, I talk to myself, argue, get angry, sad, happy. Yeah. I
went through an emotional roller coaster when I was writing about Vietnam, because not only did I have to take my father's accounts of Vietnam, I had to research Vietnam. Right. So I had to read books, watch videos. I had to go to a Veterans Affairs office and sit in. They allowed me to come in and actually sit in on their meetings where they talk and they discuss when they were in Vietnam. And after writing about it, I actually had to walk away from the book for like a month or two because I was so drained. What went on during Vietnam, the stuff I heard and the stuff I wrote about, when you read about it in my book, if it doesn't affect you, yeah, I don't care if you're a man or a woman, if it doesn't affect you, you're not feeling it. I'm telling you, the stuff that I wrote about depressed me. That depressed me more than anything.
Wow. I think that most people will find that. I know that, and I think it's interesting when you're telling your story. I think that you have like breakthroughs, and I think that when you're able to like own everything and you accept it, and you're able to, I think that you have breakthroughs, and I think that that's the emotional part for me. And even when I write with a group, I do these collaboration books where I have like 20 people in a book, and there'll be times where we're all just like a mess. Like, it's just like, it's just the hardest thing. But I think that's part of the healing process. But yes. I'm really impressed that you did so much research. I really am.
Well, I mean, I've just been a research kind of person as far as my background, even before I started working on the book, like working in leadership development, working in working with at-risk kids. You're bombarded with research. I mean, everything is statistics. I mean, so that's a lot of my background. And working with the congressman, that's a lot of my background as far as research, minority affairs, and so on and so forth. So I was able to bring that to the table. I mean, God is beautiful because God, he kind of places you in situations that set you up for the next thing that's going to happen in your life.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. So when did you first, and I want to talk about some of the other things that you do before we bring this to a close, but when did you first know that you were going to write the book? Like, when did you kind of get that inkling? I know you said it took you 6 years to get it out, but when did you first have that notion you wanted to write the book?
I was probably about 3 chapters into my book Epiphany when I found the diary. Just to give the people a little bit of background, an aunt of mine passed away, and we went to settle her affairs. And in her private room, in a closet, in a trunk, is where I found the diary in a wicker box. And I didn't know it was my grandmother's until I went through it. And of course, revelations. Probably about 5 pages in, I knew that my book I was working on was put on the back burner, that I needed to deal with this. And it just took me on a new journey. I've grown since that book. That book has matured me.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine. So now you do so many other things. I mean, you're an artist, you're a CEO, you're a coach, you're a trainer, you're a speaker. If you all go and get the free chapter from Wil's book, The Wicker Diary, you'll also get a chance to see one of your TEDx talks. So you've done so many things. Tell us a little bit about the other part of you that we may not get from this book.
The other part of me?
Or the other part.
I grew up, a synopsis of me is I just came up like a lot of people who come up today, a single mother. And, my mother did the best job she could with little. I mean, I think it was a different time back then. They made a lot happen with little. So I grew up like that. And I grew up through the crack epidemic. And I was one of those kids who got caught up into that whole situation, the crack epidemic, and always was fighting, always had issues in school with authority, with my peers, considering that growing up I had been abused and beaten. And a lot of times you develop anger problems. So I had to overcome that. And that was probably like the biggest challenge in my life, overcoming my anger. And what ended up happening is I was shot. I was fighting, and I ended up getting into a fight, and I ended up getting shot. And when I was shot, I had a near-death experience. And when I woke up in the emergency room, the surgeon who had worked on me had told me I had died for 7 minutes. And after that, that's basically what changed my life. That's what, sparked the book Epiphany. But it didn't just stop there, because a lot of people have near-death experiences, and a lot of people get shot. So that's nothing major.
Well, there's a lot of people that don't get shot too.
Well, I'm just saying a lot of people that do. The people that do, some of them go back to what they're doing. So what changed me, because just being shot doesn't necessarily change you. Having near-death experience is what I'm saying, doesn't necessarily change you.
Gotcha.
But I knew I was changed. So what happened is I was given an opportunity to volunteer with an agency. And for some reason, the kids really appealed to what I was saying, because it wasn't someone with a degree or someone with a suit. It was someone who they knew in the community with a bad education, who had turned their life around and meant a lot more to them. So that's where it started. So from there, God just directed my path. From there, Epiphany is basically life after my first life, it was I have two lives. The first life is before I was shot and killed, and then the second life is after that, and all of the great things I did after.
Post shot. So we got a couple of other questions. Clinton asked a good question. He's saying that he wants to write, but he's not sure that he has all the information, or what do you do when you don't have all the information? I say be true in my writing. So that's why they have that little phrase, based on actual events. That means that you're taking a little bit of creative license with what actually happened. That's what that caveat means. So, you have like your memoirs and your bios, which are true. Those should be accurate. But you have your times when you find something and you kind of take a little creative license to fill it in.
And that's where your research comes in at, because then you can research the time, research the music, research what was going on in history, research, because those people would have known all those things. Yeah. You want to recreate that environment. So what you don't know, you can use to recreate the environment. Right.
Carolyn wants to know if any of your aunts or uncles were upset with you for keeping your grandmother's diary.
No, I found it, so it's not nobody.
That's probably my family. I'm telling you right now.
I mean, how you gonna get it? I got it. So no, I wasn't worried about that. I'm just joking. No, I mean, I think my family is like a lot of families. You know, what you don't know, you don't know. And no one really knew anything anyway. And no one would have written a book about it. So I said, if not me, who? Right. So I had to do it.
I mean, and it really is. I mean, even though you may share some things that are not all great, you know, there may be some things that would shock people. I mean, it really is.
That was my cousin.
It really is creating a legacy for your family. I mean, it really is keeping, your family's name alive. And I think that's what was so important to me about my grandfather's book, especially. Like I said, even if it's just for family, I mean, there is still legacy there. And so, I mean, I think people should be honored, you know, I mean, I think that we haven't said this yet about your book, but I think that your book says a lot about transformation, not just, for you, but for your family. But it says a lot about hope, and it also says a lot about forgiveness, because before the diary, you definitely felt a certain way about your grandfather and how he treated you and other people. And so after that, though, you were able to see him as like the man that had also, like you said, had challenges and gone through things and been affected by Vietnam. And so I think it really is just a great story of hope and forgiveness and of, being able to change your mind, based on new information. I think a lot of us. Yeah.
I mean, I don't agree with what happened, but I can say I understand.
Yeah.
I understand what created him and what made him the way he was. So. And I love him for that.
Sharon says she loves stories like this. I do too. And I really think, because a lot of us, when you grow up that way, and I never, went through that, but I know that there were, things that I didn't like about things family members did or whatever. And, you can hold a grudge and you can feel some kind of way, for a long time. And so being able to, say this is what happened, but now I understand it, and being able to change your mind, like I said, based on new information. I think it's just such a great story. I'm so excited about this for you.
And let me say, I just want to say this too. Like letting go of that anger, like the anger that I carried all those years against my grandfather, like, and I acted it out against my peers, and being able to forgive him and let that, and like lifting the weight off of my chest, where I don't have to be angry anymore, and I don't have to take it out on people anymore. So really, forgiveness helps you more than anybody.
No, absolutely. I mean, that's what they say. They say that forgiveness really is for you and not necessarily for them. But I mean, I think seeing somebody kind of walk it out, gives us everybody else watching a little bit of instruction on also how to do it in their families. So I think it's awesome. Right. I think it's awesome. So you can, Amazon will have the book October 10th. It's called The Wicker Diary. You can also, like I said, get the free chapter. Let me put that link back up. It's you can get the free chapter. You can download it. You can read it, and you can learn a little bit more about Wil before the book actually comes out. But I'm excited about it. If you're excited about it, definitely let all your your book lovers know, or anybody that just loves a good story, as I think most of us do. But congratulations. I mean, this is, this is awesome. It's an awesome, exciting time. I hope you're enjoying, the whole process. The book comes out October 10th, Clinton, October 10th. So next Tuesday. And I hope you're just, kind of resting in your accolades a little bit before you push through to the next project.
I'm enjoying this. I'm enjoying this. And on the 10th, I can say I'm an author. I can't wait.
Clinton wants to know if there's a movie, if we're talking a movie at all about this.
Well, I have something I want to put together for Netflix. So I have someone who's kind of researching that, but you got to be a little successful from what I hear before you can actually go on Netflix. So if everybody buys it.
I know people with stuff on Netflix, and I don't know if that's the route they took. So we can talk about that off of Facebook. So.
All right.
We can't get everything right. All right. Okay. Well, thank you so much. And I'll be sharing, when the book is released on my Facebook page. But like I said, don't forget to go get the free chapter, download it, enjoy it. And once again, congratulations. All right, you guys. We'll see you later. Thanks so much.
Still there?
Can you hear me? I think you froze for a minute.
Okay.
Yeah. No, we're back. I was just saying goodbye. Do you want to say something before we end?
Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity, Nikki, and everybody. Thank you for tuning in, and definitely get your free chapter. And it's a good read. Thank you.
It's a good read. See you guys. Have a good evening. Thanks for tuning in.